Everyone's ready? Let's offer some prayers to Srila Prabhupada. Unfortunately, turn on my video so you can see me. Choose my virtual. Okay, Hare Krishna, everyone. Hare Krishna. Everyone's getting ready for Janmashtami, I'm sure, especially tomorrow. But we will have a reading tomorrow. There may be some absentees because of preparation for Janmashtami. But let's see how it goes anyway. So, Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachaline Nivasisha Sunyavadi Pashtatara Satanine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Now, I might, or I might not, and I have a meeting which is looming up at 7 o'clock. So I might have to kind of sign off a few minutes early, but that meeting might be cancelled. So if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my phone and checking my messages to see where it's been cancelled or not. So anyway, I shall let you know. Okay. Okay, Hare Krishna. So let's share the Bhagavad Gita. There you go. Hare Krishna. It's there. So quite interesting, this chapter. We started it a couple of weeks ago. It's one of my favorite chapters, actually. One of my favorite chapters. It also is the first chapter, believe it or not, because it kind of creates a wonderful picture. It's leading up to the whole discussion of Bhagavad Gita. But anyway, chapter 6 is also very interesting. So let's have some devotees would like to read text 6.5.
Prabhu, may I read?
Yes, you may. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. This is like one of my favorite verses.
Okay, one of my favorite chapters and one of your favorite verses. Yeah, I was just going over this verse before we opened up because I did learn the verses from the 6th chapter. I've also forgot them as well, so I'm trying to bring them back to memory. But yes, oh God, go ahead.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Uddharedātmanātmānam nātmānam avasadayet atmaiva hyatmano bandhur atmaiva ripuratmanah. One must deliver himself with the help of his mind and not degrade himself. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and his enemy as well. Purport. The word Atma denotes body, mind, and soul, depending upon different circumstances. In the yoga system, the mind and the conditioned soul are especially important. Since the mind is the central point of yoga practice, Atma refers here to the mind. The purpose of the yoga system is to control the mind and to draw it away from attachment to sense objects. It is stressed herein that the mind must be so trained that it can deliver the conditioned soul from the mere of nascence. In material existence, one is subjected to the influence of the mind and the sense. In fact, the pure soul is entangled in the material world because the mind is involved with the false ego, which desires to lord it over material nature. Therefore, the mind should be trained so that it will not be attracted by the glitter of material nature, and in this way, the conditioned soul may be saved. One should not degrade oneself by attraction to sense objects. The more one is attracted by sense objects, the more one becomes entangled in material existence. The best way to detangle oneself is to always engage the mind in Krishna consciousness. The word he is used for emphasizing the point, that is, that one must do this, and it is also said, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayo bandhaya vishaya sango muktye nirvishyam mana. For man, mind is the cause of bondage, and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in the sense objects is the cause of bondage, and mind detached from the sense objects is the cause of liberation. Amrita Bindu Upanishad 2. Therefore, the mind which is always engaged in Krishna consciousness is the cause of supreme liberation.
Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
All right. So any immediate questions or comments here? There's quite a significant instruction here. Anyone can perhaps point that out. It might be difficult to point out, but well, it's an instruction. In other words, Krishna is not going to do it for us. Yeah. This it said, although what's that saying? God helps those who actually help themselves. You heard that saying? God helps those who help themselves. So we have to take the initial step. Yeah. And we're practicing, sometimes it's good to be reminded that we're practicing yoga. Also, we're practicing bhakti yoga. But yoga implies, as Prabhupada is explaining in the purport and in the verse, and it's the most important principle of any yoga practice, is the mind. So if someone is professing to teach yoga and they're leading a sensuous, or they instruct their students of the need not to follow any principles or virtues, then that's bogus. Yep. So in Krishna consciousness, we have to endeavor to make the mind our best friend. Yeah. We have to do that work. Yep. And yeah. So it says here, one must deliver himself or herself with the help of the mind, and not degrade himself. So I just asked a question. Any tips on, I think the next verse is more on that subject. But 1 second before I ask this question. Okay. Let's just ask that question in the next verse. So back to text 5. Now, there's particular symptoms which is mentioned then when the mind is free from attachments. Yeah. So basically, just going back, so I'm looking at my notes here and thinking of other things. So we should not degrade ourselves. Yeah. And we degrade ourselves by being influenced by what mode of nature? Goodness. Oh.
Material nature?
Yeah. Material, yeah. Ignorance and passion. So as we move around the world, as we go about our duties and we come in contact with the objects of the senses, yeah, we will have a choice. Yeah, the mind, by dint of the mind, the principle of false ego ties our identification to the mind. You understand? The principle, the false ego, is to ties us to identification with the mind and its attraction or aversion thereof. Yeah, because we view the world through the contaminated mind. So our mind has impressions of previous materialistic life, yeah, sensuous or whatever it may be. So therefore, our mind is still running that film. Yeah? It's still running that movie. Yeah. Even though we take to Krishna consciousness. Now, if we're able to stand firm in the understanding, even if it's theoretical at first, that we are spirit soul, and we take shelter of the directions of the scripture or of the devotees. So, for instance, when we do come in contact with the objects of the senses, then we can do a check. Yeah. Sorry, Mother Chandra, if you could just mute while you're coughing away. Thank you. You follow so far? So, for instance, we take some of the vows that we take as devotees is to only eat Krishna prasadam. Yeah. And we only try as much as we can to eat food that's cooked by devotees and is offered to Krishna. So the next time you go past a bakery and you see all these lovely cakes, all these lovely cream cakes and all these croissants, nice pastries and all things like that, we may be attracted to it from past impressions. Yeah, we see it and our mind recalibrates the so-called experience that we had when we came in contact with that croissant. yeah. So then, but then we have something to, but then as again, we have the instructions of the scripture. So we understand this won't be favorable for my development of devotion, of bhakti. This is an innocent example, okay? Yeah. So then we say, no, it looks very nice, but it's not being offered to Krishna. Yeah. So that will give us, so from that experience, we will gain strength. Yeah. We will gain confidence. Yeah. Now, what happens if we have a moment of weakness? Then we may, then in one sense, then the mind gets becomes stronger. The condition, the conditioned mind becomes a bit more difficult to overcome. You understand? You kind of see what we're explaining here? As I just read a comment here. Yeah. This is from, interesting comment from Shita Swami. He mentions when the mind is free from attachments. So, yeah, what you'll find is when we do start to bring our mind under control, we should feel a sense of peace. Yeah. A sense of, described here of, Shita describes it as we become free from attachments, our mind becomes more lucid and clear and become more peaceful because we're more in tune with the Supersoul. So he describes when the mind is free from attachments, one becomes lucid and clear. And the mind then is like one's best benefactor. But when the mind is disturbed by attachments, it becomes distracted and distorted. And the mind becomes one's worst, not benefactor, but the word is malefactor. I haven't come up with means it's one's enemy. Yeah. So a lot of it's down to us. Yeah. And we can get inspiration to control our mind by listening to devotees, reading Bhagavad Gita together, like we're doing now. Just looking at the purple. So, any questions on that or any comments? Little introduction. Yeah.
I was thinking just a little while ago, I was thinking about the mind, like when there is something bothering you, your mind just keeps making up stories and things like that about that thing that's bothering you. So then with intelligence, you say, okay, I'm going to go and just chant Hare Krishna, keep going there. But you every now and then the mind keeps going back to what you thinking about, you know? It's quite a battle to, so I was realizing that how you have to be so firm when you got anything bothering you or whatever, you have to be so firmly fix your mind in Krishna.
Yes.
My thought that at that time.
Now I'm just looking for a specific quote here, which I noted down earlier, which is in regard to your point you're making. But yeah, that's why it's considered that we have no enemies in this world except for the uncontrolled mind. So someone who does, the point here is that someone who does have a controlled mind, then they're free from they're not affected by the dualities of the world. They may be praised, but they remain sober and equipoised. Yeah. Knowing that I am just an insignificant servant of Krishna. And one may be defamed, and one is not affected. Yeah. This is the test. Yeah. Heat and cold, happiness and distress. That's why these different realities are, yeah. So the symptom of someone who does have a control mind is that they're not affected. Now, it doesn't mean they're like a robot. It doesn't mean they don't have any feelings, but they remain in a joyous state. Now, I want to find that quote here.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Please, yes.
Is this a teaching given to King Rahugana?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Maharaj Rahugana in the 5th canto.
Yeah.
There's a large section there. Yeah,
he was agitated because he was jumping and carrying the palanquin. So he was agitated, isn't it?
Yeah, very good example. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, those who don't know the story, Maharaj Rahugana, Maharaj Jad Bharat. Jad Bharat. Yeah, he was but he was a self-realized soul, but in order to not get entangled in the world, he made out as if he was dumb. Yeah. And so he didn't want a chance to become entangled with anyone or anything. So then the king came and needed someone to carry the palanquin. So he was carrying the palanquin. They forced him to come and carry the palanquin, but he was very careful not to tread on insects. So the palanquin with the king in was going from one side to the other. So the king became very agitated, and he hurled abuse at him. I forget the details of the abuse, but it was verbal. He verbally.
The huge body. You have a big body. You can't do this.
You have a big body, but you're just like a dumb animal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Jad Bharat was actually, it's described that at first he felt the waves of dissatisfaction, but then he managed to pacify himself through his control mind, and he was unaffected. So this very much, so the king Maharaj Rahugana noticed this, and he was taken aback. And then Jad Bharat began to kind of ask him, you're calling me this and you're calling me that, but I am not fat, I am not thin, I am not this, I am not that. He was basically explaining Atma Tattva. Yeah. And it's quite a long conversation. It goes over 3 chapters, I think. It's quite a long conversation where Maharaj Rahugana is asking for more clarification, because what he's saying is very deep. And the king cannot fully understand, although he appreciates that a great saintly person is speaking. So he goes on to describe about the mind as being the cause of bondage in this world. And there's many, many verses which describe how the mind is the enemy of the conditioned soul, as Prabhupada is explaining here in the purple. Well, there's someone waiting to come in. Yeah. So thank you. That's a very good example. Thank you for bringing that up, Mother Padma. Yes. Yeah. Anything else from here? So we get an opportunity every time we sit down to chant the holy name. We get an opportunity. Now, there is a stage where being pleased upon our efforts to bring our mind under control and to hear the holy name, then Krishna will manifest, although will manifest within the holy name, and we will become attracted naturally. Yeah. And that's Krishna's grace and Krishna's mercy. Sometimes we may have that experience where we're trying to chant japa and mind is going here and going there, but we're quite determined. Then at some point it becomes a lot easier. Yeah, that's Krishna's grace. He's revealing the glories of the holy name. Yeah. So as opposed to the yogis, we do have Krishna sees our effort, and and as they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. Yeah. So I'm just looking here. Yeah. And okay, I read a bit here as well. The mind must detach itself from the infatuation of sense objects by, it says here, by association of those wise in Vedic knowledge and who possess spiritual knowledge. Yeah. So this is a way and a means by hearing. In this way, the mind will be elevated and gravitate towards spiritual objectives. But then he mentions, this is Ramanuja, as Prabhupada also mentions in the purple. But if the mind is in reverse direction, like a car going backwards instead of forwards, if it's subject to worldly pursuits and it's deluded by the sense objects, the mind will become agitated and harassed. That's why most people are generally agitated. So you have to be very careful what you may say to people. Because most persons have an uncontrolled mind and they're very agitated, so anything can set them off. Anyone's seen exchanges on the road sometimes? Anyone heard of road rage? Road rage? Hands up or say Hare Krishna if you heard of road rage.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Yes.
Oh, you've heard of that. That's where there may be some really small, car or something. Car maybe someone cuts in someone anyway. And then in the cars, and it doesn't take much, before two people are screaming at each other because they both have an agitated mind because they're living with an uncontrolled mind. Yeah, So. All right. So attachment to more notes here to worldly pleasures locks one to repeated birth and death. Samsara. Yeah. All right. Any other questions here? 6:6. Okay, Hare Krishna. And there's more on this subject. Let's read the next verse, 6:6. This verse, anyone's interested, is quoted by Baladev Vijayabhushana, and Prabhupada also quotes it here as well. For man, mind is the cause of bondage, and mind is the cause of liberation. Mind absorbed in sense objects is the cause of bondage, and mind detached from sense objects is the cause of liberation. Yeah, nice verse. Okay, someone could read number 6 for us. Bandhu Atmanastasya.
I can read if nobody wants to.
Go ahead.
read.
Go ahead.
Bandhuratmatmanastasya yenatmaivatmana jita anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatmaiva shatruvat. Translation. For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy. Purport. The purpose of practicing Eightfold Yoga is to control the mind in order to make it a friend in discharging the human mission. Unless the mind is controlled, the practice of yoga for show is simply a waste of time. One who cannot control his mind lives always with the greatest enemy, and thus his life and its mission are spoiled. The constitutional position of the living entity is to carry out the order of the superior. As long as one's mind remains an unconquered enemy, one has to serve the dictations of lust, anger, avarice, illusion, etc. But when the mind is conquered, one voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of Godhead, who is situated within the heart of everyone as Paramatma. Real yoga practice entails meeting the Paramatma within the heart and then following his dictation. For one who takes to Krishna consciousness directly, perfect surrender to the dictation of the Lord follows automatically. Thank you. Could you please let Mother Jambavati in? Thank you.
Okay, let me see. I can't see anyone trying to get in. Can she perhaps try and come in again? I can't see her. I can't. I've got no one trying to get in. I can't see anyone here. So perhaps you can try again.
She's trying again. She's trying.
Trying again. Okay, let's see if she. Okay. So, okay, here we go. Oh, this is Mother Lawanga. I guess that's Mother Jambavati. Okay.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah. So here, more or less, what's being described is so what type of person is the mind of friend? Yeah. Anyone could hazard again what type, the question regarding what type of person is the mind of friend? It's a question there.
One
who has conquered it.
Yeah. Well, one who is living by spiritual intelligence. Yep. Yep. And is making an effort to bring the senses under control. Then the mind becomes one's friend, or if not, it becomes one's enemy. Yeah. And
okay, what stage does the mind become your friend?
what stage does the mind become your friend? Anyone could answer that?
When you can have a conversation with the mind,
You
you
have a
can
conversation.
be able to. This is Mahatma Prabhu says about it. Don't
Yeah.
always tell that you have a conversation. You try to make mind your friend. Don't don't push the mind always. No, go. Okay, buy time with the mind.
I was told.
It's,
go ahead, Muli.
Go on. I asked that question because also is it described in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Also, it describes that even if, as devotees, let's say yogis or devotees, let's speak of devotees, then we may move in a way or in a sphere where we're quite protected. We may be firmly situated in following the regulative principles, We're endeavoring to be well behaved when we're on the internet, hopefully. But still, it's described the mind, we should still always be careful, because just like a hunter, when it captures a wild animal, it never lets it out of his sight. Because if he turns his back on the animal, then the animal will soon scarper, so to speak. So same way, we should always, without being too, creating a mood or vision that we're always on edge, which it's not the case. But we should understand that as long as we remain a conditioned soul, so into detail, I guess in answer to Mother Chandravali's question, it's when one is at the stage of ruchi or shakti, and definitely at bhava, that one will be fueled spontaneously to always go towards Krishna because of the experience of devotion. Yeah. But even then, there's again in Srimad Bhagavatam, there's the example of who was it at the exalted stage who fell down from his position?
Bharat Maharaj.
Yeah,
Bharat Maharaj.
interesting. We just spoke about Jad Bharat.
Ajaman?
No, they said no, Bharat Maharaj. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a history there. Jad Bharat was Bharat Maharaj. As we know, he was at a very elevated stage of consciousness, and he became attracted to a deer. Yeah. So one should always, it's always good. Prabhupada would pray. One time a devotee was asking Prabhupada when he was praying at the altar, "What are you praying for, Prabhupada?" Prabhupada said, "I'm praying that I never fall down." As Prabhupada himself. So that's kind of one aspect of the question that you asked, Mother Chandravali. We should always be, aware that while we're in the material world, we should always stick firmly to the principles of Krishna consciousness, because the mind can, in like a needle, heard that saying? In like a needle, out like a plow. Yeah. So we have to recognize when it's coming in like a needle. Yeah. And that we will be able to do if we've got a healthy level of hearing and chanting. Yeah. All right. Did that, anybody else on that?
Yeah, I am one of Prabhupada's disciples, my early days, Rohini Nandan.
Oh, I remember him. Yeah.
Yeah, he used to tell us that when the mind is asking you to discuss something or whatever, what you're cooking, you're chanting, and the mind's like going on about what you're going to cook or what you're going to shop, then you just have to say to the mind, like, okay, let me finish chanting, I'll give you some time and we'll discuss this later. You have to talk to your mind.
Yeah, so there's different ways that's one. Sometimes
mind, yeah.
Yes. Sometimes I think, what is that verse describes in Bhagavad? I think it's here somewhere that it comes later. That the mind is impetuous. Sometimes the mind, we have to treat the mind like a child. Yeah. You don't worry, you're going to get some sweets later. You just keep quiet for now. Sometimes we have to just the method is just to ignore the rantings of the mind. Yeah, it just goes on and on, but we just ignore it. Other times we may have to, in order to pacify the mind, then we may have to cater to its demands. But that should be done in a very specific circumstance, to keep the mind peaceful. I'm not saying we go over the regulative principles, but for instance, if someone is artificially, they're trying to eat only one meal a day, or they're trying to refrain from eating sweets, but then they become agitated and they become envious of those who are not following the same vows. Yeah. I think I gave this example before. One time we had one brahmachari, he had made this vow of only eating once or something, or not eating sweets. And he was there at breakfast, and his other devotees, they were just eating as they normally do, rasgulas and rabri and halava, you know, and then joking around and having a good time, in one sense, taking prasadam. This devotee was trying to artificially, from his platform, go without sweets. And he began to criticize. He to criticize those who were eating sweets in a quite an agitated way, you know. So in other words, he was just envious. You know, so better in that situation, better, you know, you take some sweets, but take less sweets, but like take something. You understand? So sometimes you have to pacify the mind like that, you know. But yeah. Anything else here? Anything else here? Look at some notes here.
I just remembered His Honor Japataka Maharaj said when he was very, very young sannyasi in building up Mayapur, he's chanting all the time, builders, what to do with the builders, all these thoughts come. So he started writing down, and he got that practice, and after that, those things didn't disturb him after some time. Because every time he wants to chant, he will remember, oh, the builder is coming, I had to do this. It's all about construction. His mind is full of construction.
Yeah, sorry, I was a bit distracted then. I forgot the I didn't get the main point.
No, he started writing down. Whenever the thoughts comes, he started writing
down. Okay.
In a careful, So after that, he said, no, I don't want these thoughts again, and started writing. So it went away.
What was he writing down?
He was writing down all the thoughts which is coming, what he has to do for the building, the temple.
Oh, I see. Yeah, sometimes I've heard that before. Devotees will sit there with a notebook during japa, and at one point in japa, they just write down a few things, and that's it. Shut up, mind. I've written a few things down. Now let me get on with the chanting. But the main point here is that the mind is a repository of previous attachments and aversions. Yeah. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we are going to be faced with those same attachments and aversions. But as it's said here, if we understand, at least theoretically, that Prabhupada says here, the constant position of living entities to carry out the orders of a superior. Yeah. So he mentions,
As long as one's mind.
Yeah, as long as one's mind remains the unconquered enemy, one has to serve the dictations of lust, anger, avarice, illusion, etc. But when the mind is conquered, one voluntary, is this the right verse, someone? Yeah. One voluntarily agrees to abide by the dictation of the personality of Godhead, who is situated within the heart of everyone as Paramatma. Real yoga practice entails meeting the Paramatma within the heart, then following his dictation. Then Prabhupada, as I've mentioned before, as he does a lot in this chapter, he's just reminding us that all this is actually taken care of by the practice of Krishna consciousness. Yeah. If one who takes to Krishna consciousness directly, perfect surrender to the dictation of the Lord follows automatically. Yeah. So we're endeavoring to take to Krishna consciousness. So therefore there might be some what do you call it? Some
residue.
Residue.
Yes, I was going to say residue.
So perfect surrender. So we're learning to be surrendered. As we become more surrendered, then automatically we're pleasing Krishna. Yeah. All right. I want to get to, let's have a look at text 7 as well today. We've got some notes here as well. Let's have someone read text 7. Anyone out there?
But not nicely.
Can I read?
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Did you say to me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Jitatmana prasantasya paramatma samehita siddhosna sukha dukkheso tata mana pa manayo. Oh, okay.
Got it? 7?
Translate. Yes, Prabhu, sorry. For one who has conquered the mind, the Supersoul is already reached, for he has attained tranquillity. To such a man, happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor are all the same. Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Actually, every living entity is intended to abide by the dictation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart as Paramatma. When the mind is misled by the external illusory energy, one becomes entangled in material activities. Therefore, as soon as one's mind is controlled through one of the yoga systems, one should be considered to have already reached the destination. One has to abide by superior dictation. When one's mind is fixed on the superior nature, he has no alternative but to follow the dictation of the Supreme. The mind must admit some superior dictation and
All right, go on.
follow it. The effect of controlling the mind is that one automatically follows the dictation of the Paramatma or Supersoul. Because this transcendental position is at once achieved by one who is in Krishna consciousness, the devotee of the Lord is unaffected by the dualities of material existence, namely distress and happiness, cold and heat, etc. This state is practical samadhi or absorption in the Supreme. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we got these verses now, 7, 8, and 9. They're going to explain the symptoms of someone who has a controlled mind. Yeah, this is very nicely described. Yeah, here's attained tranquility, and this was what I was hinting at in the beginning of when we opened up for text 5. Person is free of the dualities of this world. So in the verse it's mentioned happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor and dishonor. And this is mentioned many times throughout the Bhagavad Gita, actually, just being equipoised in the face of the dualities of the world. And it comes from having a controlled mind, which is ultimately achieved through the practice of following Krishna or following Krishna consciousness. Yeah. Now here also it's mentioned, it's Shuddha Swami also mentions here, evidence of the mind's friendliness is elucidated now by Lord Krishna. Freedom from all dualities, such as heat and cold, praise and ridicule, joy and grief. So again, remember I mentioned that point that our only enemy in this world is the uncontrolled mind. So if someone is ridiculing us, they are not our enemy. It's the mind who is identifying with the false ego, which then creates an enemy. You understand? That's why there's also other examples, also later on in the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's quite a graphic description of the Avanti Brahmana. Anyone know that story there? He was quite a miserly person in his early life, and he was known as being a miser to his family and the whole village. Then karma, then destiny had a turn for him, and he lost all his wealth and everything. So then he became a mendicant. And because of his past, everyone saw him as just being a cheater mendicant. Because of how he treated people, word got round and everyone started to treat him really harshly. It's quite descriptive, you know. Sometimes they would, you know, it won't go into detail, but they would urinate on his food. Anyway, he goes into quite some graphic details. But he had actually truly renounced. It wasn't artificial. It was a true kind of, he had a bit of an epiphany of his life, and now he was faced with being destitute, and he surrendered to the Supreme. Anyway, point I'm making here, in there it's described that he didn't see those who were ridiculing him, throwing mud at him, throwing stones at him. He didn't see them as his enemy. And again, he speaks about the mind. So something to keep in mind. So something to keep in mind about the mind, okay? Yeah. So, and it's not easy. Has anyone ever been ridiculed or before, or been spoken badly to, and feel how affected one is, and then how you feel towards the person? Yeah, it's always a test, you know, where someone treats you in a certain way, and then they become your enemy number one. It may just in your mind, you know, and then you see them in a certain way, and that's what it means that the mind entangles us in the material world, because that's what it does. Then we become entangled, you know. Subtly, it starts subtle, we become entangled, and then we may say things or do things to try and have revenge upon that person. That's the cycle of birth and death. But someone who has a controlled mind, instead, they will, what's an example of, say, if someone blasphemes you, and if someone's in Krishna conscious, what will they think?
This person is an instrument in my karma.
Yeah, basically. Bhaktisiddhanta, one time Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, often there would be one person would particularly come to his darshans and his classes that he would give, and he would always ask difficult, challenging questions and criticize Bhaktisiddhanta, you know. And then at some point he had passed away, because he caused great tribulation to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's disciples. So like he passed away. Not Bhaktisiddhanta, the person who was always criticizing the mat, criticizing, praising everything he did, you know, criticizing his, etc. So all the disciples, when they heard this, they were in great elation, very happy. But when Bhaktisiddhanta heard, he was very grave and very thoughtful. And disciples were curious, why is he not happy? So Bhaktisiddhanta said in a very grave voice, said, "My best friend has now died. He was the only honest person here." Because he would criticize Bhaktisiddhanta. So that's how he saw it, So anyway, so finish reading it. Finish reading here. Freedom from dualities such as heat and cold, praise and ridicule, joy and grief. Continuously poised and serene within, meditating on the Atma or soul. This is what's been described here. Yeah. He has attained tranquility because he's meditating upon the soul as he's part and parcel of Krishna. Yeah. So that means one's attained communion, old word, with the Lord in the heart. Yeah. Now there's another interesting I wanted to read. I was going to hide here. Any other questions here when I'm looking for? I took some notes in a different format here, so I'm trying to find where. Yeah, but there's one point I'm trying to find. I can't find it now, but I just remember it. Is that actually all this without devotion, even if one has controlled the mind, then unless they have devotion to Krishna, at some point in time, they're going to have to succumb to the three modes of material nature, Yeah, this. Let us read here. As previously describing that a person who's conquered their mind is their own friend, and after explaining the special qualities possessed by one who has climbed the heights and is detached from sense impulses. Yeah, so now Lord Krishna refers to the person who has traversed successfully the path of yoga, or the science of the individual consciousness, so as attained Krishna consciousness. Yeah. Such a person has transcended all dualities such as cold and heat, repeating the same thing, happiness and distress, honor and dishonor. Such persons are serene and peaceful in all situations because they are established in spiritual knowledge from the Vedic scriptures. Yeah. Hare Krishna. It sounds attractive, I hope. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes we may underestimate, we're all devotees to one degree or another. We're all here chanting the holy name. But sometimes said that we can't see our nose because it's so close to us. But actually, often when you find this, I've experienced it where one time I was with my mother in her last days, and I was there with other family members, and I was just there. I was trying to make out I was as normal as possible, trying to be there, but they knew I was a Hare Krishna. And then one of my mother's sisters, she said, I said, why is it that every time you come, it all seems so peaceful? Everything seems so peaceful. She said, there's something about, I'm not praising myself, God, we're still struggling a lot, but she was saying, there's something about you that when you come, you seem so peaceful. It makes us feel so peaceful, even in that very trying situation. So sometimes we may underestimate how much advancement we have made in this regard, in regards to bringing our mind in control and listening to the dictates of the Lord within the heart. We tend to look at how unadvanced we are, which is good in one sense. But the point I'm trying to make here is that, what we are practicing as far as bhakti yoga puts us in a very, very kind of different than materialistic people, Anyway, Hare Krishna. Any closing comments or questions on this? Otherwise, we can continue with these verses tomorrow. Let's just look at number 8. A person is said to be established in self-realization is called a yogi or mystic when he is fully satisfied by virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same. Yeah, this is quite interesting series of verses coming up now. All right. Okay, let's pause there. Thank you for joining us. Sorry, it's a little bit disjointed today. I've got notes here, there, and everywhere, and couldn't find the right ones. But I hope something we picked up. Hopefully, we're inspired to try and bring the mind under control by chanting Krishna's holy name, and inspired by the qualities which come from that to attain tranquility and be free from the dualities of this world. Okay, Hare Krishna. So thank you everyone for joining us, and please join us tomorrow. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Hare. Hare Ram, 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 Hare